On today's episode, John Rodgers and I discuss managing expectations with contractors. And later, I am thrilled to welcome back Elizabeth Finkelstein from the wildly popular Instagram account and recent HGTV and Discovery Plus TV series, Cheap Old Houses. But first, I'm Stacy Grinsfelder from Blake Hill House, and I am the host of True Tales from Old Houses. Hello, everyone. Well, over the past couple of weeks, life has been pretty exciting here at Blake Hill House. About 10 days ago now, we had 3 nights of severe thunderstorms. And on the second night, I think it was about 11:30 at night, I was laying in bed in the dark when I heard the loudest boom I've ever heard, and the whole house shook and lit up like it was daytime. I'm pretty sure that that's the closest I ever came to flying or levitating or whatever you want to call it. I went straight up into the air and I scooted over a little bit and landed right on my husband, who was asleep beside me. He, of course, barely stirred. I have no idea how some people can sleep through this stuff. Anyway, I knew the lightning bolt was very close, but I wondered if it could have hit the house. And then I started hearing a bunch of commotion out in the hall, so I got up to check on everyone. Half of our electricity was out, and it turns out that 2 of my boys were actually in the kitchen when it happened, right next to them. And they were very excited about the whole thing. Keep in mind that their frontal lobes aren't fully developed yet, and danger is still a great adventure. On the other hand, my fully developed brain was having a very hard time grasping the situation. At that point, I was still thinking that it must have hit the transformer across the street. But when I looked outside, the power wasn't out for any of my neighbors. And that's when I realized that we were the ones who had the problem and that lightning really did strike Blake Hill House. First and foremost, my boys were unhurt. Thank goodness. They were standing and talking in the kitchen directly inside of where the lightning strike occurred, outside. And also, thankfully, nothing caught on fire. As far as we know, the lightning entered the house via the internet cable on our second floor. Now, it is possible it jumped over from a nearby tree, but that section of our house is quite exposed, so I really don't know. The current traveled down the outside wall and straight out of the grounding rod, which thankfully existed. Without that grounding rod, I don't want to even think about what could have happened. I was able to reset the breakers, but our internet was fried from the cable all the way to the pole outside, and the shock destroyed our modem, router, and mesh system. We had to have a technician repair the cable, and we had to buy all new hardware. Then, a couple days later, I was on the sun porch, and I discovered that the panel and plug for our electric dog fence had completely blown apart. The panel was laying on the floor all the way across the room and scorched entirely black. The plug was still in the outlet, but the plastic plug cover, I don't actually know what that's called. I'm sure it has a name, but anyway, it had split into 3 different pieces, and I found all of that plastic in different areas around the room. Honestly, it could have been so much worse. You may remember the story of the house called Louise that Lane and Kevin Barry told during episode 46. A tree right beside Louise was struck by lightning, and the poor house was a total loss. It burned to the ground in a matter of minutes. Luckily, instead of a catastrophic event, the strike here was simply a week-long inconvenience. And that grounding rod really got me thinking about the low-tech safety that builders and tradespeople added to these old houses. And I'm going to write an article on it and put it on the Blake Hill House blog soon. In the meantime, there's plenty over there to read about this particular event, as well as the tiny, tiny, tiny amount of progress that we are making on our 2-bathroom renovations and the garage build. All of that is at blakehillhouse.com. All right, I do have a little housekeeping note this week. Recently, a few people have said that they don't know where to find the show notes. It occurred to me that I always mention the specific website address in the outro, but maybe not everybody listens to the outro. You can find everything related to True Tales from Old Houses directly at truetalesfromoldhouses.com. And that includes show notes, our sponsors, and coupon codes, merchandise photos, and anything else that I mention in each episode. The Blake Hill House blog is my personal scrapbook for the house projects here at Blake Hill House. It's where I talk about DIY and what's happening. The Blake Hill House blog and True Tales from Old Houses website are linked in case you go to one instead of the other. However, truetalesfromoldhouses.com is where you'll find everything you're looking for that pertains to this podcast. Hopefully that helps instead of confuses the issue. Now, if you ever have questions about the difference between a website, a blog, a vlog, or a podcast, please just reach out to me through either website and I'll explain it all. I assure you that there are no dumb questions. For today's listener Q&A, John Rodgers from Phoenix Preservation is back. Hi, John.
Hello. Back for round two.
Back for round two. So to refresh everyone's memory, the question last episode was, how do we find passionate, qualified resources, especially outside of the Northeast? You and we had a very productive conversation, but in the course of that discussion, I realized that it might be helpful to listeners to hear some ideas about how to manage expectations with contractors. The truth is, we can't always hire a master craftsman well-versed in old house restoration. Sometimes we can't afford it, and sometimes that resource is simply not available. So let's talk about it. How can homeowners communicate effectively with contractors to reach the outcome they want? Do you have some ideas, John?
I think the biggest thing is, and we touched on it briefly last time, the biggest thing is finding a contractor that fits. And that means so many different things. Fit based on budget, fit based on experience, but at the same time, fit personality wise. You can be a master craftsman of whatever trade. And if you act like a jerk or you come across like thinking, talking down to the homeowner like they have no idea what they're doing, it's probably not going to be the most successful project. You might end up with something beautiful, but you're going to have such a bad taste in your mouth afterwards that there aren't going to be any fond memories. So really, it's finding that mixture of the three, like the contractor you can afford, plus somebody that you can get along with, especially in historic restorations, because it's not an in and out job. They're going to be in your house for, a couple of days, a week, a month, a year, depending on the scope. So you really have to feel comfortable with them and have a certain level of trust and respect.
Right. So let's focus our conversation there on how to determine if somebody is a right fit, maybe personality-wise even. Like, how do you know when you want to work with someone? I mean, how do you know that's going to work? Or how do you know when it's not, maybe? Maybe that's a better question. Everybody's personality is a little different.
Right. Yeah. When it's not is usually pretty glaringly obvious from the get-go. I mean, as a contractor, because contractors, especially in this line of work, because there's so much out there, I mean, we're basically picking homeowners as much as homeowners are picking the contractors, which sounds weird when you say it out loud, but you really have to find a right fit and find somebody that is looking for the type of work that you're comfortable doing. I've had jobs where I've had to turn them down or I've had to walk away because the request that the homeowner made just not that they didn't make sense to me, but it wasn't something that I felt comfortable doing. Either it was outside of my grasp of what I felt comfortable attempting, or it was something that was so against what I thought was okay old house wise that, it was better for somebody else to tackle that.
Right. Has that happened to you with a window project before?
It has. I've actually had, and one glaring example, the homeowner loved their original windows, but hated wavy glass, just did not like the look of it and wanted full restoration and all of the wavy glass replaced with modern glass. Not insulated glass units, the IGUs, not an energy efficiency retrofit. They just hated their wavy glass. And it was I struggled with it for a while because on one hand, I would love to have a source for free wavy glass that I could use somewhere else. But at the same time, it hurt my heart to just take all of this perfectly good wavy glass. It's been there for over 100 years, just because the homeowner doesn't like the look of it.
That's so strange.
As far as I know, the windows are still unrestored. So hopefully there's hope for them yet.
That's really strange. I don't know. I can't imagine that being the thing I'd want to give up. So, but like you said, everybody has their own ideas.
Everybody has their own ideas, but at the same time, you kind of pick a house that at least you have a starting point. You've been in my house. If I wanted to live in a log cabin, I would not have started with this house. I think we used that in the original interview.
You're right.
There's things to give and take, but there's extremes that probably shouldn't be crossed when it's completely altering the look of the house.
Sure. So as a homeowner, I find that making a list of deal breakers really works for me. When I know I'm going to have to compromise, I'm not going to get everything I want, then I will sit down and I'll make a list of things that are really important to me. So for instance, I'm working on an upstairs bathroom project right now. And I want a contractor who's willing to work with a particular kind of shower pan that I want to use because it's the only one that I feel confident won't leak over the long haul. So I'm looking for, when I'm talking to contractors, I'm looking for someone who knows what they're talking, knows that pan I'm talking about, is willing to use it, is happy to use it, and doesn't tell me they're going to use it. And then I listen for other sort of red flags that one contractor told me, oh, well, the way we always do it is this way. And I said, well, I know because that's exactly how they did it in my old house that leaked like crazy after 7 years. So that's why I'm really interested in using something different. And you can say things assertively yet politely. You don't have to say, well, that's not what we're doing here. I really said to him, I said it just like that, yeah, I'm really familiar with that process because, but after 7 years, my shower leaked. They came and fixed it, and then it leaked again after 2. So I'm looking for on the second floor of this really old house, you and I know that it's never just one floor that's affected. It's going to be everything underneath it. And so that's why it's really important to me to use this particular product. And then I felt like we were on the same page, and he is actually the contractor that I hired. Another thing that's helpful is that I'm going to be on site. So I can pick a contractor knowing full well that I'm going to be around if things go awry. That's not true for everyone. Some people have to go to work during the day. They aren't here. So they need to hire someone who they know they can trust. I mean, I trust this person, but I'm saying they know that they're going to be able to come home and the work's going to be done and there'll be no surprises or few surprises. Yeah. There's always surprises, few surprises, I should say.
Definitely. Yeah, that's the level of trust. And that's, for me as a contractor, that's probably a better compliment than social media response and telling me I did a great job at the tail end. Like walking into a job site and they give you the key and say, hey, come and go as you please. I mean, that signifies a certain level of trust between the homeowner and the contractor, especially if the homeowners aren't there. If it's a house that they're not living in, they're basically saying, we trust you to do it the right way. Here's the key. Let us know when you're done. And that's super important on the homeowner side as well as for the contractor, because you have to feel comfortable that trust is there.
So, and I would argue that some projects are just too high stakes overall to compromise. And I have a couple of examples. My grand staircase and also the chimney that I had rebuilt on our house. Those two projects, I can't afford that master craftsperson who couldn't, I guess I should say, especially to do that staircase. Yet by the same token, I wasn't willing to compromise by hiring someone else. I mean, I literally had 3 people tell me, painters, oh, you don't have to take all the paint off those balusters. You just put a little filler in there, sand it, and repaint it again. I'm like, and I know full well that is not correct, and so I'm not willing to compromise there. So I'm going to be doing that project myself. But in the case of the chimney, I saved for 3 years because the chimney was not a project I could do by myself, but I also didn't want to trust it to just any mason. I needed a real professional who'd worked on old houses, who'd done a crazy chimney like mine with 3 stacked flues, and it was a big deal. If you're in that situation where you're not sure, you feel really uncomfortable, I would just wait. Just wait. There's usually no big hurry. Sometimes we feel like there's a hurry, but oftentimes these houses have been falling apart for for so long. Right. Waiting a little longer isn't going to be the difference between a house standing and a house falling.
Right. Yeah. And usually it's pretty glaringly obvious if it's something structural that needs to be addressed right away. But yeah, in the grand scheme of the life of the home, 100 and something years, and we're in a rush now because it's been 6 months or 2 months, or we have a company party that we want to throw at the house at the end of the month. You can rush and make it look pretty, but if you do the pretty stuff before you do the important stuff, it's not going to last and you're doing it again.
All right. Well, I guess we threw out some ideas there. We haven't solved everybody's problems. If only we could. So if anybody has any other ideas, please do send them to me through the contact form, and I will happily share your methods for communicating with contractors on an upcoming episode. That would be great. And for you, John, I hope you'll be back this season to help me with other questions.
Absolutely. We can always do a part 3.
Part 3. Yeah. Well, we'll have a different question. We should talk about other things too sometime.
But we'll get better and better if we do the same question over and over again. By the end of the season, we will be professionals.
That's true. How patient could people be if we just continually answered the same question every time?
But in a different way.
It's true. All right. I'll talk to you later, John. Thanks for coming.
All right. Have a good one. I'll talk to you later.
Now it's your turn. We have a new question this season, and it is, what is your favorite thing about living in an old house? Or what's the most challenging thing about living in an old house? And here are some of your answers, starting with the favorites. Marie said, there's nothing like warming your bath towel on a radiator. I don't have radiators here at Blake Hill House, but I can just imagine how nice that must feel. Kelsey loves being able to play songs with her squeaking floorboards. There really is no sneaking around in an old house, is there? Squeaking floorboards are the original burglar alarm. Now for the challenges. This answer from Myrtle Farms reads, I'm never happy with the details. And I took this response to mean the details of their own work, not the actual beautiful details in their home. I feel like it might be time to talk about paralyzing perfectionism here on the show again. And finally, Patty finds the lack of money for repairs to be the most challenging part of owning an old house. And Patty, I am sure you are singing the song of many. As my friend Lindsay from Blind Eye Restoration said to me, old houses are very needy, and that is the truth. I want to hear your answers all season, so please visit the True Tales from Old Houses website. On the bottom right-hand side, you will see a microphone icon. Click on that mic, and you can leave your answer as a voicemail. Please answer in a complete sentence, and you can leave that voicemail using your phone or even your computer. If you're shy about leaving a voicemail, which I understand, I get it, feel free to submit your answer via the contact form instead. Your privacy is important, and I will not share messages without your permission. So again, this season's question is, what is your favorite thing about living in an old house? Or what is the most challenging thing about living in an old house? Thank you, Marie, Kelsey, Myrtle Farms, and Patty for taking the time to answer the question this week. I want to take just a couple minutes to tell you that True Tales from Old Houses is supported by the Window Course from Scott Seidler of the Craftsman blog. The Window Course is a step-by-step, do-it-yourself program that will teach you everything you need to know to successfully restore your historic wood windows. It's self-paced, so you can go as fast or as slow as you need to, and there are several price points to fit your needs and budget. The cooler weather, it doesn't have to slow down your window restoration progress. I live in one of the coldest places in the United States, and I work on them year-round. You can too. If you sign up for the Lifetime Access Package or Training Package, then you'll also get a free infrared paint remover, which is a $130 value. That's $130 right back in your pocket. The Window Course is offered with a money-back guarantee, and now it comes with that infrared paint remover too. I've still got a coupon code for you. Scott is offering True Tales from Old Houses listeners a special discount. For 10% off, visit thewindowcourse.com and use the coupon code TrueTales. True Tales from Old Houses is also supported by the Plunger app, whose mission is to solve 100% of plumbing problems that don't require an on-site plumber. The Plunger app is free to download. Open the app on your phone or tablet, click Talk to a Plumber Now, and you'll be connected with a licensed plumber in your area who will help you troubleshoot and solve your plumbing problem with a face-to-face voice chat. It's so cool. I've used the Plunger app twice, and I tell everyone about it. A pro at Plunger helped me install a kitchen faucet and garbage disposal, as well as a toilet in the upstairs bathroom. You know me, DIY projects rarely scare me, but plumbing does feel a little more high stakes, and having instant access to a plumber makes all the difference. Plunger can even ship all the parts you'll need right to your front door. Plunger truly is plumbing for the people. So here's what you need to know. Download the free Plunger app at plunjr.com/download, and I'll put that in the show notes too. Tap Talk to a Plumber now to solve your problem. And there's a True Tales from Old Houses secret word, and that word is flapper. Mention the word flapper and get your first call for only $10. So what are you waiting for? Use our secret word flapper to save, and be sure to tell them that I sent you. My guest today is Elizabeth Finkelstein, the tireless champion of cheap old houses and the community who loves them. I'm not going to offer a big introduction because Elizabeth does it so beautifully for herself.
I am Elizabeth Finkelstein. I am the founder of Cheap Old Houses on Instagram and Facebook, cheapoldhouses.com, and the co-host with my husband, Ethan, of Cheap Old Houses on HGTV and Discovery Plus.
Hello, Elizabeth. Hello.
Hi, Stacy.
Welcome back to True Tales from Old Houses. I had to look back through the seasons to find out when you were originally on the show, and it was episode 11, believe it or not, over 2 years ago, and this is episode 61.
Oh my gosh, congratulations.
Thank you. Congratulations to you too.
I loved your podcast because I'm a person who I love podcasts, and I've been searching for podcasts for a long time that have anything to do with preservation, architecture, old houses, and there are so few of them out there. And so I really feel like you're fulfilling a void and a need, and I'm very grateful to have been a guest on here twice.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. I love doing the show. I always tell people, I said, this is the work that I do on True Tales from Old Houses is truly my absolute favorite. I mean, I do a lot of things. I have my hand in a lot of different old house stuff, but True Tales from Old Houses is definitely my favorite.
Well, you can tell. I feel like there's a lot of passion on this show, and I've learned so much from it. And I'm excited that I always am excited that people find a way in the old house world to sort of find their niche and contribute in a way that is very fulfilling to them. And I'm excited for that.
Well, thank you. Thank you. I was going to make a joke and say not much has really happened in 2 years. Life, pretty boring, nothing to report. But of course, we know that is not true. And I was so excited about this interview. I had a funny dream last night, when real life crosses over with, work life. And I had a dream that you all had fake names. So basically that you came on the show as Elizabeth and Ethan, but you stayed Elizabeth, but apparently Ethan's name was Henry. And for some reason, I assigned the name Harrison to your son. You don't have to tell me what his real name is.
That's so funny. Well, Henry is my grandfather's name. So maybe you had a little bit of a premonition about that. And he was a great inspiration to us because he left his life in New York City and bought a farmhouse in upstate New York, and he raised my family there. So that's very interesting that that's the name you came up with.
Well, let us start at the beginning. I want to know, how did your show come about?
Oh, wow. Well, we were approached, I think just as our Instagram feed started to gain popularity, we were approached by a number of production companies who were interested in working with us and making a show out of what we do, which struck me as very funny because I think in so many ways we are the principle and the methodology behind cheap old houses is very antithetical to the way that most home renovation TV shows work, which is sort of like a fix and flip model. And we fight against that. We do not believe in flipping. We believe in slow restoration. We believe in taking your time. We believe in doing as much DIY as you can, while also there is no shame in hiring out the work if you feel that that's necessary and you have the means to do it. But we love the authenticity of what cheap old houses represents and don't necessarily appreciate a lot of the inauthenticity that a lot of home renovation television has put out to the world. And so, it was going to be difficult for us to fit what we do into a TV model. And so for a while, we had these production companies reaching out to us, and we could never really land on an idea that made sense to us. We are also not people who I would say are fame hungry in any way. We're quite private. And so if we were to do a TV show, we wanted it to be something that was really good for houses, really good for our brand, and made sense, because we weren't going to be on TV just for the sake of being on TV. And so for a while, the idea just sort of sat out there, and we were open to it if we could find a way to do it, but it didn't seem that we really could. And I think as the feed increased in followers and networks and production companies started to understand that there was something to this, and maybe we could take a little bit of a leap of faith and think outside the box in terms of format, that we could take a bit of a risk. The network, HGTV, was fantastic, and they were totally willing to not try to change us into something we weren't, but to look at what we do and make it appropriate for television. And so I feel like we landed on a model that we're so happy with. It is at once, I think, aspirational, but also feels very attainable. We've had so many people tell us that after they watched the show, they went online and started looking up cheap old houses because they felt like they could do it. And that is something that I don't think you get a lot of in a lot of home renovation shows. Not everyone has the budget to hire a designer. Not everyone feels that they can take a house in that kind of timeline that is required in order to do a major transformation like that. And so a lot of people, I think, have felt left out of the game in terms of these shows. And I'm excited that we're making this feel accessible to anyone. That's part of the whole ethos behind cheap old houses, is that you too can do this. And there's a way to do this for anyone, no matter what your means, no matter what your background is, you can do it.
So, how did you choose where to go and who to visit? And it really brought home just how small the Old House community is because there were so many familiar faces.
The Old House community is so small. And in a sense, that made it a little bit easier because we sort of, I think, use this as an opportunity to visit people that we for so long have been inspired by. And I think in terms of any business that you start, it's always, if you are inspired by somebody or something, chances are other people will be as well. So we really wanted to visit people this season who we felt really spoke to our hearts, and that would be a great sort of first opening season. We looked for people who were geographically diverse. So we wanted to visit all different parts of the country, at least places where there are a lot of cheap old houses. And, we were specifically looking for people who purchased their houses for under $150,000. So that was sort of the cutoff. And yeah, we really just found 10 people. Ethan and I had been saying for years before we even got this TV show deal that we wanted to do a road trip visiting all the people who we follow on Instagram and have been, just inspired by. Stacy, you are one of them. Oh. if we're going to come visit you and you're going to show us how to restore our windows, that's our dream.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Well, I don't have to put it on my calendar quite yet, but I will prepare myself for your visit because that would thrill me. We would have so much fun. You could come and we do a little workshop. I have all kinds of windows here. I kind of collect them from the side of the road on trash day, which of course is tragic, but I save them for the purpose of teaching, if nothing else. We'd have so much fun together.
We totally would. And that's something we've been wanting to do for such a long time anyway. And I think that our favorite part of filming this show was going to visit people who we have been following for such a long time. And it's so funny. We always say it takes a certain kind of person to want to restore an old house and get into this kind of world where their lives are in a sense really devoted toward restoring their house, documenting the process, and just kind of jumping in full force. And that was really evident to us when we were doing this road trip for the show, because as soon as we met all of these people, it's like instant friends. We just understood each other from the get-go. There's a certain way of looking at life that people in the old house world all kind of share. and it's like you walk in and you don't have to explain yourself. You're just like, oh, I totally get you. That was what was so fun about the filming.
Oh, that's so great. Did you really drive everywhere in Ethan's old truck?
We really did drive everywhere. The only place we didn't drive was to Texas. And the truck came trailered. But really? Other than that, we drove everywhere, which was fun.
That does sound like a lot of fun. I wondered if there were any sort of magic of television moments.
Very few. I think that's one of the things that excited me about doing this is that the show is extremely authentic. We didn't stage anybody's house. We didn't bring in furniture. We didn't help them, finish a room. Everybody really, really, what you're seeing on the screen is what people did with their houses. And I wanted to show that reality. I probably, if it were up to me, would have shown more of the unfinished rooms because I think that's so important for people to understand when you're restoring a house. Everybody is always like only a third done.
Yeah.
And you're probably only ever going to be a third done. And I think that's just an important thing for people to understand. The show was extremely authentic. All of the houses we showed at the time of filming were for sale and actually actively on the market. A lot of them still are. And the people we visited had actually done the work and you were seeing the fruit of their labor and no one else's. And that was extremely important to me. I would say the only tricks were we had to trailer the truck a couple times because we were filming in snowstorms. And frankly, it wouldn't have been safe for us to drive that in those circumstances. But that was really the only show trick that you saw.
That's really neat. So you showcase thousands of houses on Cheap Old Houses. So how did you narrow it down to certain houses for each particular episode of the show? Not the people you visited, but the houses that you wanted to show that could potentially be featured on Cheap Old Houses.
We cast the show around the homeowners first. So we searched for 10 people who we thought represented a great kind of sampling of people who are restoring their houses of various sizes, of various geographical locations, of various styles, of various incomes and experience. And we wanted to really encapsulate the whole old house world in those 10 people. So that was very important. And then once we found that, we searched for houses on the market within, I would say, maybe a 2-hour range of each of those homes. So when we cast, for example, Amy and Doug Hevelin in Franklin, Indiana, we searched, for a couple houses close by to them that we could go visit while we were there. And so really it was a matter of what was on the market at the time. We tried very hard to, and weren't always perfectly successful at this, but to kind of theme it. So for that episode, for instance, if you saw Amy and Doug's episode, it was all Victorian houses. And that was really nice because there was sort of a thread of Victorians that was through the whole episode. That wasn't always possible. And in some times we traded the theme for the better houses. So for instance, if there was a kind of a gigantic schoolhouse on the market, we couldn't say no to that, even though we probably weren't going to find another one as well. So honestly, I'm happy with how the for sale houses came out, because there were some that were move-in ready. There were some that were sort of quirky mid-century with, pink bathrooms and all of the kitsch from that era. And there were some that were very historical. I mean, we had a salt box from the 1700s in Connecticut. And I think it really ran the gamut and it showed a great range of these homes. And I was really happy with how it turned out.
I liked it. I enjoyed learning from you too, because I think when you show us cheap old houses, it's a house and a caption, but you really know your stuff. And I think it was a learning opportunity for people who watched to learn from you about different styles of houses and what might have been happening at that time that influenced the architecture. That was really cool. That was probably one of it was unexpected. I don't know why I didn't expect it, but I didn't know what I was getting into. It was a really unexpected pleasure of watching the show, was learning so much from you.
Well, thank you for saying that. Learning was my favorite thing too. I'm just a nerd. I really am. I could go down a rabbit hole. My absolute favorite part of filming the show was researching the houses and going down, intense rabbit holes of old catalogs and, looking up everything I could about terrazzo floors. There were things that we encountered in these homes that I just hadn't seen that much of, because I'm from the Northeast. I've always lived in the Northeast. And you go to Texas and you go to North Carolina, and there's a totally different vernacular. Architecture is incredibly regional, and the way they did things, in so many ways, houses are all about the climate, and it's all about just like keeping warm.
Right.
So how do you do that in different places? And everybody had a different methodology, and there were different local materials available for early houses. And so, and Indiana has a huge slew of Victorians, because the Victorian period is the time during which that state really blew up in population. And so it's extremely regional, and it was a little bit of a wake-up call to me how much I don't know, but that was also so exciting, because look, I have a graduate degree in this. If I don't know it, like, how can no one,
right.
There is no way everybody is going to know this. And I hope that the show gives you a little bit of permission that if you don't know the difference between a tower and a turret, or whatever the terminology is, you can still love old houses. It's fine. You'll learn it. I think if you're going into your house in your best effort to honor it, you don't need a professional education in this, or a formal education in this to really be able to love old houses. And I probably said the wrong thing in the show a few times, and you know what? It's fine.
Right. We've talked about that a few times on the show. I mean, this is a real positive show. I like to keep it in a positive spin. But there are these times when we get called out for saying the wrong thing. And my response is always, did you understand what I meant? And if the answer is yes, I'm like, you can still restore your windows, even if you don't know what any of the parts are called. Like, if you can point to it and you can get the products and do the work, if you don't know any of the words, you can still restore your windows.
I equate it to wine a lot. I think the world of wine has a similar sort of intimidation for a lot of people, because they go in and they're like, well, I don't know how to describe it, and I don't know if I like it. Well, do you like the taste of it? Does it stir up feelings in you when you drink it? Like, is there something about it that speaks to you? And I think, look, I knew the magic of old houses when I was 2 years old living in them. I grew up in one. I didn't have a formal education in them at all. And I understood that they were magical because I was a child growing up in one. And that's all you need.
Great point. Every time you discovered something beautiful or unexpected or hidden within one of these houses, it was clear that you were so excited. And I'm wondering, what was your favorite discovery from this season? Something that made your heart beat maybe just a little bit faster?
That's a great question. There were so many things. A lot of the things actually we didn't even show in the episode, because Ethan and I would always after we cut the filming, we would run down into the basement or go to the attic. And I know that every old house person would do that. But they weren't necessarily the showy rooms with the details, so they didn't make it on camera that much. But we would always go in the basement and find just, the discarded old doors, or a lot of times you'll see they'll have taken out the original kitchen and it's sitting in the basement. This is a very common thing in old houses because back then people didn't dispose of things so quickly. They reused them because materials weren't readily available as much as they are today. So they would take the kitchen cabinets and, repurpose them for something in the basement as storage. And I always love looking in those hidden rooms that aren't necessarily like the showy rooms. So we had a lot of fun doing that. I loved finding that speaking tube in one of the houses in Amy and Doug's episode in Indiana. There was like a original Victorian speaking tube in one of the closets. And because that's something that I had never encountered before. But I had heard of them and I'm like, what the heck is this? And I like anything that really speaks to the way of life back then and the sort of social history. That was really exciting. We saw a lot of old wallpaper, which excites me. The number of interior shutters that we found, there were a few houses we went into that had every single window had their interior shutters completely intact. Literally, I'm talking 30 windows had perfectly operating interior shutters. And that meant that they all had tiny little hardware knobs on them that were like, Eastlake or a particular style of hardware. And they were absolutely beautiful. And these are things that don't make the real estate listings. The real estate listing is beds and baths and, updated kitchen.
You always know when you look at a listing, if the kitchen's not in it, you're like, they're not proud of that kitchen. I wonder why.
People often ask me, why didn't you show the kitchen? And I'm like, I only show the kitchen if it's a historical kitchen, because otherwise, the thing is with bathrooms and kitchens is that they are the most flipped rooms in every house. Everyone goes to sell their house and they change the kitchen and the bathroom. And so the whole rest of the house looks like 1930 and the kitchen and bathroom look very 2016. And because trends move so quickly now, 2016 kitchens look very different from, 2020 kitchens. And so they date themselves quite quickly. And so I usually don't want people to be looking through our feed and all of a sudden, come across the 1990s kitchen. It's just kind of a buzzkill. So on our feed, if we don't show the kitchen, it's usually because it's like, meh.
Yeah. I know. I like that idea of staying in the moment. Would kind of break the mood if you are flipping through the photos and land on a 90s kitchen for sure.
Right.
What would you like to see happen with the Cheap Old Houses show? I mean, how would you grow it if you had the chance?
I have a lot of thoughts on that. And I think the network does too, and our production company does too. And now that it's aired, we have the good fortune of getting feedback from people. And by and large, the feedback has been excellent. The ratings were very good. I think that we have thoughts about how to improve it even more. I think it's a very different show for the network. So I think we got to a place that was awesome. And I think we can take it even further. I would love it to be longer so that we could really sink our teeth more into the histories of these homes and the stories of the people who restored them. There were definitely things that didn't make the cut that I found to be very interesting, but we had a 22-minute cut that we just couldn't do them justice in such a short amount of time. So I would love it to be longer and a little bit meatier. It depends where you come from. I think the show is trying to do a lot of things and be a lot of things for a lot of people. A lot of people love the sort of renderings to sort of envision what the house used to look like. And I know that on a network like HGTV that is really all about showing transformations in before and afters, it's very important that that is there. There are a lot of people that love the quote unquote History Channel aspect of it, where it's a lot of digging into the sort of histories of the homes and the towns. Or hearing the stories of real people who have done it, or seeing houses that are actually on the market, and what does that mean? And there are really so many ways we could take this. And right now we're really thinking hard about if we are to get a longer format, or even if we're not, what works and what we could sort of put on the back burner to sort of enhance the other aspects. I have to be honest, I don't have a perfect vision in my head. I love I love what it is, and I love where it could go. And I think there's a lot of potential.
Each episode looked like it was created with kind of a mix of a full film crew and then you and Ethan maybe outfitted with GoPros or something. And I was wondering, what was the sequence of filming for each show?
Yeah. So each episode took about a week to film. We would go one day to each different house. And it was funny to see it just all of a sudden in a 4 to 5 minute clip. That was a whole day's worth of filming, driving up to the house. And you have to shoot everything multiple times. So we're getting a reaction walking into a room from many different angles and many different times. I always joke, I have a vision in my head of our 2 cameramen standing in every bathtub in every house we went into to get our reaction walking into the bathroom. Veronica and Paul at Stony Run Farmhouse in Pennsylvania have a beautiful little mint green bathroom. And our cameramen were huddled at that bathtub as we were standing in that bathroom talking. It was very cute. So each day was a different house. So the first day we would visit the first house for sale. The second day we would visit the second house for sale. The third day, and it wasn't necessarily in this order, but usually we tried to follow the sequence of the show. The third day we would visit what we call the saved house. So the people who had restored their house that were featured in the episode. And then the fourth day would be pickup shots. So sort of driving scenes in between, or us interview style, as you see a lot. That's called OTF, on the fly, where we're sort of just standing there and reflecting on what it is we're seeing in each scene. It was quite cold.
It looked cold.
We were really cold filming this, but we were bundled up underneath our coats. And it was an excuse for me to get some really fun, colorful coats, which made it really fun. I think if I had dressed the way I really should have been dressed, I would have looked ridiculous. So I had really had to balance like looking a little bit cute with, being warm. And our crew was great. We got a lot of breaks and we got to go sit in the warm cars, and there was a lot of coffee. There was always coffee being handed to me, which was lovely. And mind you, remember, we're filming this in a pandemic. So there were masks and there was, spray on everything, constantly like sanitizer spray. And we were limited. We couldn't necessarily go warm up in a public environment. So we really had to kind of rough it. But I think the tone of it, I think it would have been funny had we filmed it in a very comfortable place, because there's nothing about restoring old houses that is that easy or that comfortable. And there's a little bit of an exploratory and a little bit of an uncomfortable aspect of this that I think is part of the charm. And I think I would be a little sad if we filmed season 2 in really warm, comfortable weather, because I think the look of it is you're kind of out there and you're kind of taking a leap of faith and you're a little bit, uncomfortable. I think that's part of the brand a little bit.
Sure. All good points. Hadn't really thought of that. You mentioned earlier that about the regional differences in architecture and how it's primarily about staying warm. And that really hit home. I thought, gosh, you're right. You're right. The first question of any house is, how could we cool it and how can we warm it? And that has everything to do with position on the property and all the windows and heating. So super interesting. You gave me a lot to think about there.
It was interesting. There was a house we visited in Connecticut in episode, was it 1 or episode 3? It was the salt box, and it had that giant center chimney that had a fireplace coming into every single room. And it was the fireplace they cooked on, and it just heated every room. So that house was built with the idea of keeping all the rooms warm at all times. And that's something I'm quite familiar with because I grew up in New England, and I'm very familiar with these kind of houses. My aunt, my cousins had a salt box that we would always spend Thanksgivings at. And to me, they're sort of the ultimate, perfect Thanksgiving house. So, but then we went to North Carolina and we visited a house that had a detached kitchen, and it had a long center hallway that the air could flow through. It was just a totally different way of building. And that was about keeping them cool in the summer, whereas everything up north was like how to stay warm. And I'm reading this great book called How to Be a Victorian right now that I highly recommend. And it's written by a British social historian, and she's fantastic. And she talks about how literally the first line in the book is you step out of bed and your first thought is like keeping warm, because we didn't have heating and there were fireplaces in every room, but only the very wealthy were able to have their bedroom fireplaces on at all times. So a lot of times, and even they didn't necessarily. So really so much about old houses is thinking about temperature control.
That's interesting. I will link that book in the show notes.
It's a great book. She's written a whole bunch of others, and now I'm going down a rabbit hole reading them all because they're fascinating.
Yeah, I'll look forward to it. Well, moving on to a different topic altogether, I really wanted to find out more about your show. You probably maybe didn't want to talk about all the little nuts and bolts of how it was produced, but I was super interested. So that's my rabbit hole today.
I think that's fascinating. And I'm always happy to talk about it. I think it's very interesting. I didn't know anything about TV before we started it. And one of the really fun things about going through this process is learning how these things are produced. And I'm always excited to talk about it for sure.
Well, now that Cheap Old Houses has been released to the masses, this is kind of a tricky question, but has there been any criticism? I mean, I know you're really private. Have you felt, how do you stay away from anything like that?
For the most part, it's been overwhelmingly positive. I was bracing myself for it. I had read all the books on how to deal with criticism. I had armored up against it. And I was pleasantly surprised at how many people were very, very kind and excited about it. There always are people who are going to be unhappy, but I think that just comes with ever putting yourself out there into the world. There are going to be people who will criticize you. And I am extremely, I think, sensitive. I'm very creative and I'm very protective of my ideals. And when people criticize them, I get very upset. So what I just do is I don't read the comments. And I think that's
Smart.
just an important thing because look, you're never going to please everybody. And especially with what we do is really outside the box. It's a different way of thinking than most people. And I think if it was pleasing everybody, I would be doing something wrong. So, there have been, little things, but I think that is just, if you're going to have a TV show, you're going to get criticism. It's sort of like something and this is something that I've been dealing with since I started my brand. We have a brand that's based on social media. And there is the ability for everyone and their brother to comment and tell you what they think of you. And so I don't think anybody who runs an account like I do or has a show like I do is immune to this. And you just have to say, all right, I understand that there are going to be critics. And really, you have to build a place for them within your business because it's just the cost of doing business that you're going to have people say things.
All right. Well, more positive topic. I found out via your show that you and Ethan finally found your own cheap old house. And when you were here 2 years ago, I think Devin or I asked you if you were looking, and you said something to the effect of, we're always looking. And I really want to know what you found. How did you decide on your cheap old house?
That is true that we were always looking. And part of the reason why we started Cheap Old Houses is because we're always looking. And it was really a stockpile of houses that I had found that I was interested in. And so we just started putting them on an Instagram feed, never thinking that this would become a business or anything that, would make us an income. And we live just outside of New York City in a very, very expensive place. And I think just doing this for so many years and watching and being inspired by other people like the people that are on our show that have taken a leap of faith and are living a life that just sucks less money out of them every single day was really inspiring to us. And I think more and more felt we really wanted to do this too. The house we found, which for privacy purposes, I don't like to give the location.
Oh yeah, no need. I just meant what type of house did you choose and why? Sure.
So the house that we chose is a farmhouse. It's on about 11 acres. And it's funny, I didn't post it on the feed because it was really bad. Most of the houses I post on the account generally have a lot of their features intact. So something you can kind of hang your hat on, like, oh, look at the staircase or look at those doors or the woodwork or something. And this house had just been in a situation where it had been really gutted. And it was in a location we really liked and I was familiar with and I loved actually. And I saw the listing and I showed it to Ethan and we were like, oh yeah, unfortunately, like it's sad, it's so gutted. And then Ethan took Everett, our son, camping for the weekend and I was with my mom and I was like, we were bored. Let's take a long drive and go look at this house. So we did. And as soon as we got there, I saw the land, I saw the house, and I was like, uh-oh, Ethan's going to really like this. Because I'm a real house person. And I think Ethan has become more of a house person since being married to me because I push it on everyone. But Ethan is really, at his heart, I think he loves the idea of a lot of land. And so I said, Ethan, like, we should go look at this. And so he went over and, it's funny. Although we weren't sold on it when we first saw it, I think we truly feel like it's a slice of paradise. We are so happy with it. We've come to learn that it is quite possibly the oldest house in the town. And we also found out that we didn't think anyone else was interested in this house, to be honest. But I think we were at that point a bit naive to the COVID market and what it was doing and how so many people were looking in these rural locations. It's quite rural. And we didn't know that there was someone bidding against us that apparently was like maybe or maybe not going to keep the house. And we won and we paid $70,000 for it and we are keeping the house. I mean, I am so set on keeping this house. I feel like this house landed in the luckiest hands because we really love it. And I'm very intent on making it feel like it's from 1777, which is the earliest place we could date it to. It's quite exciting.
Have you started work? Are you doing the work, some of it yourselves?
We're doing a lot of the work ourselves. The house needed a lot of structural support, which is something that we didn't know how to do ourselves. And we felt like, look, we're not going to do this twice. We're going to do this once and we're going to do it right. So we did hire that part out. And, I just want to say, and I'm probably the worst person at spreading this around, but you don't have to do everything by yourself in your house. I want people to know that that's a very important thing. Everyone has a different schedule. Some people have young children. That's very hard to do work when you have young children. Some people have very demanding jobs and not a lot of time. And if you have the means to pay someone to do certain aspects of your house, you have not failed at all. Like, that's great. And so I just wanted to throw that out there. I think that there are some people that believe in doing everything DIY. There are some people that can hire the work out and are perfectly fine doing that. And either way is fine as long as you have the best interest of the house in mind. However you want to go about it is okay.
I agree. And I feel like I don't say it enough either because I do tend to be do so much DIY. But honestly, that's all motivated by budget for me. I mean, if I could do it differently, you can darn well bet I'd do it differently, at least in some cases. So I agree with you. There are many scenarios in which hiring someone is better for your mental health, better for your physical health, better all around. So there is no shame in that whatsoever.
I was talking the other night to Veronica and Paul, who I mentioned before, who are featured on the show and their farmhouse in Pennsylvania. And they said they like to do a lot of DIY as well. But they said they always like to, in every major project, pay a professional to do one aspect of it because it'll push you over the hump enough to say, okay, at least one thing is done. And then you get motivated. If you have a lot of open jobs going on at the same time, you feel like you're never going to get over that hump. And I thought that was really good advice. They kind of splurge on one little thing in each project that they do.
It's really smart.
So for this one, the house was leaning like in many different directions that didn't make any sense. We had to rebuild a whole foundation wall. So a lot of the work we've been doing so far has been hired out. I think once we get to the more detailed interior work and that sort of stuff, that's where I feel comfortable. And that's what I probably will do work on.
Do you have a target? This is always such a silly question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. But do you have a target potential move-in time, or is this kind of an ongoing project? I mean, you don't have to. You don't have to know.
We honestly don't. We live in a house that we love, and we would never have been able to have a second house if it wasn't extremely cheap, which is what it was. And so we don't have a time frame that we have to have it done, which I am so happy about because I want to do it right. I don't want to rush any decision. And I do feel like we're taking our time and and I think when we finally have it done, which could be years from now, it's going to be exactly the house that we love. We're extremely fortunate. I don't take it lightly that we are able to do this kind of thing while also being in a comfortable house. But it feels really good to have that luxury right now.
Well, I have to ask because the last time I talked to you, you were talking about what kind of fireplaces you liked. And one of them, you said you like the large kind that are so big, like a Hansel and Gretel thing where you could stand in them. Does your cheap old house have a giant hearth?
Sadly, it doesn't. It is not a center chimney. It has chimneys on either side. This house was originally built as a federal house, and then it was Greek revitalized sometime in the middle of the 19th century. And we don't know exactly when. And there were a lot of changes that were made over the years. And I'd like to bring it back to being federal inside, although the outside is quite Greek revival. It unfortunately doesn't have that center chimney to be able to have those fireplaces. And it's also had its chimneys removed. They were originally internal chimneys, and then they were taken down. And then sometime in the 1970s, there was an external chimney built on one side that was not a great chimney and came into a very tiny little hearth. So we took it down and we're actually planning to rebuild those internal chimneys. But I just don't see any way that we could squeeze in one of those beehive or those gigantic fireplaces with a beehive oven. Right. But it is still very alive in my dreams, believe me.
Maybe an outbuilding or something at some point. You could build an outdoor kitchen and have your very own.
that would be very cool.
All right. Well, it was so lovely to catch up with you again, Elizabeth. Thank you for coming back.
Stacy, I could talk to you forever. I just feel like you get it. And I really mean it when I say our house has some original windows. It has some replacement windows, but all of them are old. And so I'm excited that's kind of the thing that I said I want to do. I want to do the windows. I want to figure it out. And so I probably will employ your expertise at some point to help me do that. So I really mean it when I say that.
Yeah, I would love to do that. And there's something very, very satisfying about restoring old windows. They are always a source of a little bit of frustration. There's always something unique and different about each one. And when you're done and you stand back, it just feels so good. So it would be my pleasure to help you with that. I would be honored, in fact.
That would be awesome. We will make it happen.
Why don't you tell everybody again how they can watch Cheap Old Houses and where they can find you? It's truly a fun and really educational show. It was great entertainment and I loved it.
Well, thank you for saying that. The run has concluded. It was a 10-episode run on HGTV, but it is available at any time to stream the entire season on Discovery Plus. And you can always follow us on Cheap Old Houses on Instagram or Facebook and find all the information there as well. And if you go to cheapoldhouses.com, which is our website, there's information about the TV show there as well.
Well, hopefully we can grab coffee together in person sometime in the future. But until then, I will see you in my computer and on my TV.
Thank you, Stacy.
Thank you, Elizabeth. And thank you for listening to True Tales from Old Houses. To continue the conversation, be sure to follow True Tales from Old Houses and Blake Hill House on Facebook and Instagram. And for more information about this episode, including show notes and transcripts, visit truetalesfromoldhouses.com. Until next time.